Wonderful. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you all for sticking around for this panel. I have to say, I'm actually very excited for the future of enterprise software panel. As an investor, I've been kind of a partner with Uncork for quite a while now, which has been fantastic. But as mentioned, I had about a decade of experience as an actual operator and technologist inside enterprise. And so enterprise software in general is something I'm very, very passionate about. Even when I think about it through an investing lens, I always try to go back to basics and really think about what are the challenges that those who are sitting in really the face of digital transformation and technology evolution are grappling with and their perspectives on the topic. And so I'm very excited to be joined here today by three distinguished technology leaders who all work with very large enterprises and have a perspective on what we're seeing in enterprise software today and where it may go and take us in the future. So with that, I want to maybe flip around and we'll do quick introductions. So we've rearranged orders, but very excited to have Paul Walker here, who is a brilliant technologist. I have the pleasure of working with him at Goldman Sachs when he was co-head of technology there, and then also through our work on the board at Uncork. I'm also joined by Kafir, who is global head of BlackRock technology, and previously CTO of Hewlett-Packard, and Max Gelfer, who is North America CIO of Chubb, and previously CTO at Goldman Sachs across a number of our different businesses, most recently the PWM and CWM private wealth management and client wealth management business at Goldman Sachs as well. So with that, very excited to jump into it, and we'll start with the big question. What is the future of enterprise software? So if perhaps you can give us each a little bit of background again on how you're thinking about it and where you're sitting, and just start us off with a few words around when you think about the future of enterprise software, what does that look like in your words?
Less of it. So, I was thinking as I was listening to our KPMG colleagues that they talked about solving an ESG problem. And when they talked about solving an ESG problem, they said, here's the data collection, here's what our clients need to do, here's the information that's missing. They didn't say, and so I went back to my office and opened up Visual Studio Code and typed in some JavaScript, right? They said, here's the problem I solved. And so when I take a look at what we've done with enterprise software in the last 50 years, we've solved some amazing business problems, but we've solved it through the venue of actually writing some COBOL or some Fortran or some C or some JavaScript. And so when I think about what's next, it's finding ways to better align that outcome with the activity that you take inside your organization. And Gary has this thing called serverless became cloud. And what happened with serverless is we stopped expecting companies to own computers, right? We have this massive, if any of you invested in the 2001 web, you get a business plan from someone who wanted to do whatever their business plan was, and in the back of it would be, hiring some marketing, hiring some development people, and $25 million capital expense to buy some computers. If you saw that business plan today, you would laugh at someone. But we don't laugh at someone who says, and $25 million of HR to write some JavaScript. Right? But we all know that that's the same type of debt. So I think the future of enterprise software is finding ways that we can have less of that debt through architectures that look exactly like a codeless architecture.
Great.
Yeah, I'll explore a little bit on this. I'll give you an example. I was talking to my daughter. My daughter was writing Python this weekend, and she was like, I know what I need to do. I know how to do it. Why do I need to know how to indent the code and where to put the semicolon? And it's a great question, right? Like, think about, we know in a lot of cases what we need to do within a business. We know what we're trying to do, but this gap of translating and writing comes in place of just doing, okay? And the other term which I want to bring in when you talk about the challenges, right? You heard Julie, one of our biggest challenges in Chubb is our success. We've been a very successful company. We have a very successful product. Some of you may probably use it, Masterpiece, within the private lines. It's been around for 25 years. The code is 25 years old. It was very innovative probably 25 years ago. But what do I do with this now, right? And the interesting concept, as the more I think about it, we talk about technology debt, we're not talking about the business debt. The processes and procedures which were built around this product in the past 25 years are the same business debt as it is a technology debt. Okay? So how do we not accumulate? How do we bring the whatever the two sides together and build the software is a bad word. Build the implementation which brings together the business outcome without accumulating neither the technology debt, but equally not accumulating the business debt. Think about every single piece of software which runs dictates our people what to do. They think that they're in charge, our business people. It's the software which tells them what to do. In a lot of cases, they don't know what to do until software tells them what to do, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah, I have a quite interesting perspective on that. I used to build computers, and then I built these hyperscales, and then I built software that makes these hyperscales run. Now I'm doing financial services. And when you have this kind of a perspective, you kind of try and philosophize around it. But the reality is we're right now into an abstraction time. Some people call it transformation. Because I'm coming with the background of putting all these transformation programs in place, I'm tired of calling it transformation. But everybody here in this room is involved in this transformation. And this, as Paul mentioned, it's about cloud somehow. It's about software that needs to be transformed. So there are all kinds of ways of doing that through, lift and shift your stuff and put it there into what we call cloud, which is the core of this digital change for everybody, or replatforming. Both of them, they are expensive. This whole exercise, it's more expensive than you want. Unfortunately, it's even more expensive than what you thought if you're doing the right calculations. And then it's come this idea of, codeless. And Gary and I, we had a lunch the week that he was about to open the company, I believe. And he told me about it. And I think I gave him, a little bit of my perspective. The reality is, it's something that is missing. It's a second level of abstraction. Therefore, it's very difficult to people to jump this S-curve that was beforehand. The topic of thinking about how you move to the cloud that I just mentioned. So it's challenging because if you use codeless for bad monoliths, you're still going to suffer. If you utilize a modular way, understanding that you're doing double abstraction, you're going to be very successful. So I think that's the right path, and it's the details into it and what's it in the boxes. It's very different for everybody and every type of business here.
That's great. I think you touched on a couple things in that as well, both some of around what the future state looks like. But as you got there, you were talking about some of the challenges that prevent us from getting there faster. Can we go into that a little bit more and really, as we think about eliminating technical debt and as we think about bringing together business requirements and kind of not defining things by the operations processes, but actually the outcomes, how do we make that jump, and what is the challenge with making that transition in large enterprise today?
I'll tell you, the best thing is everybody's talking, everybody's a technology company right now, of course, and everybody's talking about, how to do it right. And there are areas that they were never touched by technology, and right now technology is doing magic. So one of the areas that I'm deeply passionate about it nowadays is data and AI. I'm very much invested into that. And as part of this business, I own index composites. Okay, an area that was never touched by technology, at least in our world. And when I looked into the amount of time that, index composites takes us, I was horrified. Wanted to optimize that. I went and I told the guy that is running index composites, I'm going to invest and put technology around you, we're going to have time to market like awesome. Couple of months later, nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. Apparently, it was not only about, the technology investment, utilizing any kind of code or codeless around it. It was the understanding of the process. It was about the deep understanding of the process. It was about the lack of capability to translate things from process to software, or to even connect processes together, which you need if you want to even touch it with codeless. So my message there is one of the biggest complexities is to actually understand what is the process that you're trying, or what you're trying to put technology around it. I think that's the number one challenge. And from there, I can go another 120. But that's kind of right.
I think I agree with that completely. I think there's a big people challenge as well, right? When email first came to corporations, senior people had their admins print the email so they could write the response on it, and their admins could type it back into Lotus Notes. That is actually true, right? If you're sitting here and you're like 27 and you think that's a lie, that actually happened, right? Because that technological change didn't change that person's view of what their job could be. And especially with things like what codeless will do to software development, it's very much like what cloud is doing to infrastructure jobs inside enterprises. You have two types of change that need to happen. First of all, your developers need to stop thinking that their job is to write code, right? The thought experiment I was doing with the group earlier is if you woke up tomorrow, your business was exactly the same, did all the same processes, and you had 25% more source code, would that be better or worse? Right? That'd be worse. Right? So your developers have the shift, but also the accountability onto your business people shifts as well. And this idea of business people versus technology people, I've run businesses and I've written computer programs, right? You can do both and still be a walking, functioning human being, right? The idea that there's some difficulty in coding that means there's an activity that's not a business activity that your coders undertake, and there's an accountability that's not technological or process-driven that your business leaders have, has to go away, right? And that's a big change. And it's a change we haven't been able to realize because you do need to open up Visual Studio Code and type some JavaScript in, and you're not going to learn that if you got an MBA from Wharton, right? But as Gary and the team at Uncork make it so it's much quicker and much easier to express your business process directly in a codeless fashion and deploy it to the cloud securely, and all these other features we've heard about today, and do it in a way that's data integrated and fits your workflows, that means your developer's job is different, but it also means the expectation of what you have of your business leaders is radically different. And I think that's a change that could be a real interesting one.
Yeah, and I'll bring it back to probably the most simplistic thing, right? Like, what problem you're looking to solve will define what you're solving, right? If your problem you're looking to solve is to write the system, you may write the system. Will it help the business? Who knows? If the problem you're trying to solve is enable the business, grow it, and we can talk about the different ways to measure it, then you're probably going to do a different thing, right? And that's where the change comes in. Because instead of saying, I have business people, as Paul was talking about, and I have developers, you start thinking about what is the output I'm trying to enable. And that's when the people are going to question themselves, hopefully, or not, with what actions do I take to get where I need to be to solve this problem. And that's where, instead of this series of events which leads to writing a system, which may or may not, in a lot of cases, may not solve the business problem, you start solving business problems at the very top. And every time when I hear a business person saying, I'm not a technologist, I don't know what it means, right? What does it mean you're not a technologist? Does it mean that you cannot articulate your problem? Does it mean that you cannot articulate how to solve your problem? What does it mean when people say, I'm going to have my, God forbid, IT department to go solve it, right? And the other side of this is, do we think big enough, right? When I talk about the problem, simple example, Chubb is $50 billion Chubb underwrites $50 billion, which is huge. It's the largest P&C company in the world, okay? The size of the insurance market is $3 trillion. We can grow and grow and grow. And there is absolutely no way that we can get from 50 billion to whatever multiples of 3 trillion by doing what we've done before. And that's why if you put your question this way, if you put your problem this way, you're gonna start thinking as technologist, and you're gonna start thinking how to change your business problem in a way to apply the best technology.
Yeah, and look, just one other thing. I love that comment, Max. It makes me think about this trope that every company is a technology company, right? Uncork is a technology company. We write and sell technology, and that's, if you take a look at the revenues, it's this much money came in from technology. Goldman Sachs liked to say it was a technology company. I always used to joke that it's weird because that, means our annual report should say technology 0, other 36 billion, right? That idea that you're a technology company, it's not the right way to think about things. The idea is that you're a company that has to be accurate and digitized when you deliver your offerings to your customers, and your customers have to appreciate and use those, and you have to grow your company and expand your market and make your customers happy. It just so happens that to do that today, you use computers. Just like to do it 50 years ago, you used telex machines and telephones. And just like doing it 100 years ago, you used telegraphs, and 150 years ago, I don't know.
Sticks.
200 years ago, this is actually true, 200 years ago, to get information from the New York Stock Exchange to the Philly Stock Exchange, people built a series of poles across New Jersey, and they paid people to run up the pole and write a number on a chalkboard so they could get lower latency communication from New York to New Jersey and do high-frequency trading in 1823, right? Like, that's actually true. Is that does that mean you're a flagpole company, right? So you're a company that is undertaking a business and you need to do it efficiently. And software development has ended up making that incredibly powerful, but we can do better now, just like we did better with servers, just like we did better with infrastructure. And that's why codeless is super duper exciting, to realize that business vision without that cost of all that software development.
That's great, and I love kind of the dive in and interweaving of technology and business. I want to stick on that and go a little bit deeper. When, as technologists and running large teams across engineering technology, when you think about measuring success and the success of your teams, how do you define that, and what does that look like for you?
For us, success is when we're succeeding, with the task of the firm, which is making better financial outcomes for our clients, which is the firefighters and teachers. And that's how people think about it, believe it or not. It's very difficult and different for each one of the organization that I'm running to understand what success is, but everything runs by metrics. When it comes to, say, codeless and everything around it, it's very straightforward. I'm getting a monthly report about everything that we managed to optimize, and the investment in that is proportional to the outcomes. The success, it's very visible. It's dollar-based in the U.S. and there is no secret sauce there in how to do it. I think that everybody can look at the use cases and learn out of them. I think it's straightforward.
Yeah, look, your measure of success for your project depends on your project. The one thing I know in every project I've done in the last 30 years, no one has ever called me up and said, can I please have more code, right? Lloyd Blankfein didn't call me up and say, more software, please, right? And so the idea that you have measures of success is how you run successful projects. The fact that we've used software to do that is happenstance of the tool we had on hand. But the measure of success won't change when your tooling's better, just your ability to meet it will.
Yeah, and I had an advantage because I changed jobs 2 years ago to the field which I knew very little about and still know very little about. And when I started, people would run to me and say, you really need to help us build this piece of software. And I would be, well, great, I definitely will help you, but why? And then you start unpacking it, and in a lot of cases, like, maybe you don't need it, actually. I'm probably more proud of the software I did not build than of software which I did build. Not kidding, like, not. The worst nightmare is that when people come in and say, we worked for the past 3 weeks, days and nights to do this, and I'm like, why did you do all of this? You don't. But the part of this is going back to say, so what is that you're trying to do? Especially if it's a business person, back to business person, smart people, a lot of very smart people in Chubb, and then it starts coming out. So your point about what you're trying to build, I need to get this product on the market much faster than whoever told me before. I need to change this much faster, this business rule much faster than somebody told me before. I need to reinvent, or I need to create a new process. I need to connect to my brokers and get, whatever, all the information and get back to them within a day, because then I'll get the business and others will not. That's such an easy, it's, to be honest, the more you ask questions, people will tell you. People not gonna, as long as you're not satisfied when somebody tells you, go put this, number in Excel and then everything's gonna be great, as long as you ask the question, people will tell you. And that's a true measure. Because whether I build a wonderful system, even 25% less code, it's not gonna do anything unless the company makes more money, or unless something happens in a business which did not happen before. And again, until you know this, I said it to developers all the time. I said it in the Big Four forums as well. If you don't understand what you're building, do not build it. Yeah. Raise your hand, do not build it. Come to me, tell me Max told you, do not build it. More than happy.
Yeah.
That's great. So I want to pause for a second, and I want to go back to something that, Paul, you had mentioned in part of your comment around an analogy for the serverless movement. And we're talking about what success looks like, what the future of software looks like. However, there's a big cultural shift that sort of has to happen to bring some of these things together. And so I wanted to go back to that, which I thought was a very thoughtful comment, and just get a little bit more on your perspective of what and how does this look like, the movement to serverless, and what can we learn from that potentially can help us expedite that transition to solving these business problems, not technical necessarily, but business problems through slightly different tools.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we'll all have a perspective on that that's going to be interesting. I think the move to serverless taught us a lot, but one thing it taught us is moving legacy code to serverless is awfully hard, right? And that isn't something you could ignore because your competitors don't have that problem necessarily, right? It is much easier for a new company to use the cloud and not have a data center where someone runs a drill through a wall in London and knocks out your trading or something like that, than it is to
replace the poles and wires across.
Exactly. There wasn't wires. No, it was chalkboards. Remember? And so I think there's definitely a thing we learned from the move to cloud, that it makes a differential advantage for people who can adopt it when they are doing new things, and I think that's pretty terrifying if you are not adopting it. I think there's an entire cost structure and capital structure and accounting treatment that is super important with the move to cloud that could come to the move to codeless as well, as we think about not just paying lots of people to type in the same code again to put a button on the screen, or not having 392 different copies of a button class in your software stack in your company. I think that'll change the economics. But the most important thing is you have to get used to the idea of this thing you thought was a core competency, namely running a data center full of Sonos machines, is now useless, and you should just give it to Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. And that's a hard shift.
I think, both serverless and codeless, they are solving an optimization problem. One, it's solving, towards, and it's about different type of resource optimization. So, with the move to the cloud, one of the biggest and scariest things for developers is that when you need to go and start developing your code, the first question that you're asked is about your network topology. They don't know nothing about network topology. And that's a problem. I did not see anything about network topology when earlier Gary and Bassam, they were showing a little bit about how codeless works. And that's a big thing. De facto today, and that Max raised that point, there is this point that, I'm not a technologist. It's kind of, it's a sentence without meaning. There are startups out there that will tell you, I'm going to teach you to be able to get a job in software in 6 months, and if not, money back guaranteed. So everybody can, somewhere in their lives, if they want, and it's important for them to go in this direction. What about if you don't need to do even that? That's what codeless is all about. So think about it.
Yeah, I'll talk about a little bit about the problem with the serverless, with the cloud. And again, I changed jobs. It strikes me how hard it is to solve plenty of problems. But each company needs to figure out how to go to the cloud. Each company creates its own strategy. Then you figure out SDLC. Then you figure out how you're going to deploy. All of this part of SDLC. But it's everybody reinventing again the same wheel. And then when you are in a cloud, you use the tools which particular to this cloud, and you cannot get out because you use Redshift instead of whatever the Azure equivalent is. Okay, that to me is a major deficiency of where I want to be. Okay, on the opposite side, and that's Gary for you and on Cork, don't restrict. Right? Because if we're going to come into codeless and you're going to say you only can integrate with this software but not that software, if you're going to start telling us what to do and how to do it, that's where the same problem becomes. The more it becomes, I can do what I need to do, and I don't have additional restrictions. And we had a number of conversations how to integrate different software inside, right? Because Uncork is not going to be be-all and serve-all in all cases, right? But that's to me this lesson of it's a great idea and solved a lot of problems, but it still did not solve additional problems which are there. And you all know this, right? You all have I'm sure most of the people, unless you're a brand new company, have the problem of how do I get into the cloud? And somebody in my company tells you I need to be in the cloud. The other thing I will say very quickly is on the developer side, right? Who were opposing the cloud the most? Local technology, the company technology department, infrastructure department, who were writing the code for proprietary network. Because that makes perfect sense. If I go to the cloud, I lose my job. Like, what can be as simple as that, okay? In case of the codeless, in case of the whatever the new name is, the ability to build application in Uncork, and Gary needs to come up with a better name, or we need to come up with a better name to what are we building in, that needs to be a skill which is valued on the market. And if developers, together with business, recognize it as a skill which pays, which they can feed their family with, it will be totally fine. But it needs to be the skill which is recognized on the market as a valuable skill which you can put on a resume and you can find the next job with.
That's great. It's funny. It really is such a reverberating theme between every single comment is the future of enterprise software is not necessarily software. It's solving business problems faster and better. And the more that you kind of go into the weeds through the eyes of those in the seats, you kind of hear more and more about get closer to the problem, ask questions, don't assume, don't build anything unless you know why you're building it. As you start seeing that transition and more coming together, do you see technology becoming the business or the business becoming technologists?
Well, look, the fact that it's surprising that the future of enterprise software is solving business problems, I think is a condemnation of how we did enterprise software for a long time as well, right?
Yeah.
And it shows how hard enterprise software has been. And it's only now that I think we've had the technological and intellectual advances to start breaking some of those problems. As I said earlier, I think it'll be impossible to run a business if you don't understand process, workflow, digitization, customers, accounting, finance, HR, compliance, all those things. And you have to realize those as things that people can interact with, and the way people interact with everything is through technology. So saying I am not a technologist I mean, it's kind of like saying I can't read, right? You know, you need to be able to read to do your job. You need to be able to understand technology to do your job. So I think the divide will lessen, and I think you'll find more and more people who are conversant in technology as part of solving a business problem, and more people who are conversant in business problems as far as choosing which technology to deploy. And, you know, those specializations at the top of organizations will diminish.
This is a topic that currently it's very much in discussion, exactly the way that you framed it, because it happens a lot in board levels, where basically the decisions of boards nowadays, it becomes so much with an instant substract of technology that if you're not, if you don't understand the layer under, you're not able to be relevant for the discussion. So, you know, where I'm living, it's a place where there is no difference between business and technology. I think we talk about the same thing, and it's kind of abstracted. We run a platform for ourselves and the clients that it's kind of an abstraction of technology and business. So I feel that that's the right thing, exactly like you frame it.
I know we're out of time, so I'm going to be quick. The more I think about it, I actually think this problem has been decided already. And I'll give you a simple example. When people tell me, and I've done it a number of times, people tell me, I'm not a technologist, I don't understand what it means. I ask them to open their phone, and how do they use on a daily basis? Do you use email? Yes. Do you use Facebook or whatever it is? Yes. Do you pay your bills through the bank? Yes. And all of a sudden, you realize it's no longer sticks and billboards. People actually use technology pretty much most of them, like, more than you don't use it. So saying I'm not a technologist, I don't know what it means. Now, problems on us that our applications are so horrible that you need to be a technologist to decipher and use it. That's fine. Like, actually, my son and Goldman use an application which I built. I've never got so many complaints on how stupid it is. It's so embarrassing. But that's a big part of it. But nobody's saying I'm not a technologist, that's why I'm not going to use iPhone. I'm not a technologist, therefore I'm not going to, I'm not going to watch a movie on the Netflix, right? So my hypothesis, the problem been solved. We're just not introducing it from the right perspective in the enterprise yet. And when we do, people again will start talking about business problems, solving them with solutions like codeless, and stop talking about what I'm a technologist, I'm a business person.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are at time now, so I know we're running behind, so we'll call it there. But thank you all very much.
Thank you so much,
Great
Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.